so excited to introduce everyone to Marcy Zaroff. It would take me the entire 15 minutes that are scheduled for her to speak, to go over everything that Marcy has done over the past over 2 decades. So it's wonderful when you get to meet and spend time in a fairly small group with someone who has really led and pushed and moved an industry forward. So Marcy coined the term eco-fashion. She has been instrumental in creating the Global Organic Textile Standard, or GOTS. Raise your hand if you know what GOTS is. Awesome. So I can say myself as a designer, GOTS has made my life so much easier, and I know it's really been transforming the industry, so speaking about ecosystems. Marcy has worked in just about every role that you can think of in this industry. So working with big brands on eco lines, being a serial entrepreneur, working with a lot of entrepreneurs. MetaWare, which Marcy founded, is located here in the DC area. So someone who is working in this region on socially and eco-conscious production. So there's so much more that could be said about Marcy, but I will let her say it herself, and just want to encourage everyone to come to the book signing later on tonight and get to spend more time one-on-one with her and get a chance for a signed copy.
So it's a little be careful what you wish for, right? When I coined the term eco-fashion, I actually didn't know the difference between a knit and a woven. But I did get best dressed in high school, and I did recognize that fashion was a very, very important vehicle for change. So I know that Rebecca didn't go into my background, but I actually didn't start in fashion, I started in food. So in 1990, I co-founded a school to take people on this journey of self-realization and discovery, environmental awareness, consciousness. Today the school is called the Institute for Integrative Nutrition and has certified over 75,000 people as health coaches worldwide. The country, it's in about 135 countries right now. So having learned that really about the whole food system, which, as I said, is where I started, I recognized early on that there was an interconnection in agriculture and also at our level of basic needs. Maslow's hierarchy of needs starts at food, ultimately evolves to shelter and clothing. But learning about agriculture, I realized that there was this missing link in this whole equation, that you really couldn't support organic, healthy eating without understanding the relationship with fiber and textiles, because cotton and many other fibers are growing in agriculture side by side with food crops. So 60% of a cotton plant is actually going back into our food system as feed for dairy and also for bread products and snack food. So if you look at the back and the ingredient labels on many, many products on the market today, they're made with cottonseed oil. So when I realized that, I said, how come nobody knows this? And when I coined the term eco-fashion, people thought I was absolutely insane, that nobody will ever buy into this. This is for a bunch of tree huggers. And I was like, okay, so I'm fashion forward and I am a tree hugger. I want to bridge those worlds. I can't be the only one out there that believes in our relationship with the environment and how important that is, but also wants to have style. So the premise of my book, Eco Renaissance, which just released last month, is about through the lens of design, we can change the world, right? It's all about no compromise. So when I started my first company in the apparel space, it was called Under the Canopy. Still, you can buy Under the Canopy products today, 22 years later. And I, kind of woke up very quickly to the fact that the supply chains in textiles are extraordinarily complex. So a garment can change hands anywhere from 7 to 10 times. And most people back in the mid-90s when I started were going to their factory and they were saying, I want this. And it was the factory's job to build the whole supply chain. Well, given that I was passionate about eco-fashion, when I would go to factories, they would literally look at me like, I don't have no idea what you're talking about. This doesn't exist. So I had to start at the source. And so to me, what is so exciting about this movement all of these years later is that we can connect the source to the story, finally. that we can take all this amazing work that we're doing in the trenches, building up the supply chain from the where is my clothes coming from, who's making it, what's in it, and we can pull the curtain back finally and we can unveil the human and environmental impacts of fashion. So, as Rebecca mentioned, in the 90s, I was on the team of people that actually wrote the very first organic fiber standard for the United States, which ultimately became a super exciting collaboration with Germany, Japan, and the UK, and we created the GOTS standard, which is the Global Organic Textile Standard. And the whole idea was, how do we look at a finished garment and have that full transparency and traceability that says this is not just certified organic cotton, but we're also not putting harmful, toxic dyes and chemicals into the product. People don't realize when they hear, oh, that's an organic garment. If it's not certified to the GOTS standard, it could be like literally dipped in chlorine bleach and processed with formaldehyde or heavy metals or all kinds of toxic chemicals. So, given my background in the organic food side, and I actually today I'm on the board of directors of the Organic Trade Association, which governs all organic products in the U.S. We do a lot of policy work here in D.C. And we've grown the industry literally in the last 25 years to be a $50 billion industry, the organic industry in the U.S. So for me, the low-hanging fruit in sustainable fashion or eco fashion was connecting the dots from food to fiber, which was why we birthed the GOTS standard. The other standard that I've been really involved from the beginning with is the Cradle to Cradle standard. Raise your hand if you're familiar with Cradle to Cradle. Great. Okay, so we talked about circularity and this notion that, what we take from the earth, we have to give back to the earth. That it's not an endless stream of resources that we have, and that this whole linear economy is basically destined to fail. I mean, business as usual is not sustainable. So the Cradle to Cradle certification measures material health, material reuse, water stewardship, renewable energy, and social justice. And so I'm holding my Who Made Your Clothes t-shirt, which was actually the very first Fashion Revolution garment ever. We partnered at the very beginning when Fashion Revolution was born, and we created this in the factory behind you, which is located about 40 minutes from here. So I birthed a company called Moderator that was built on the principles starting with organic and connecting the dots from food to fiber. So how many of you are familiar with this whole pesticide treadmill and the concept of the suicides that are going on? So cotton, to me, less than 3% of the world's agriculture is cotton. But statistics vary, but you'll see 16 to 20% of the most harmful insecticides. You'll see 5 to 10% of the most toxic pesticides are being used on cotton. And so we all know you are what you eat. We've all heard that. But we sleep on cotton sheets. We use cotton towels. We have robes. We're wearing denim. We're wearing t-shirts. We're wearing cotton clothing. And still to this day, when you say to someone, organic cotton, they're like, what? Why does that matter? But our skin is the largest organ in our body and our primary organ for absorption. I'll just layer onto this the fact that organic today is not even just about the health and the environmental benefits. Organic is good business. It's win-win-win business. So when you look at the social story, and I mentioned the pesticides and the treadmills, so in India, every half an hour, a conventional cotton farmer is actually committing suicide. And that's because what's happening is they get lured in by the seed companies, who then tell them they're going to have these fantastical yields. And, of course, the seeds go in conjunction with these chemical cocktails, the heavy pesticides. And what happens is that over time the bugs build resistance, the chemicals have to get stronger. Of course, that means they're more expensive. The farmers can't afford that. And what they're doing is they're actually leveraging their farms to the banks that are partnered up with the seed companies. And a new piece of little information that I get excited about is that India has now banned GMOs completely in all food crops. The only crop they're still allowing is cotton. I'm going to India on Wednesday, so. On mission. But But, this whole idea of, it's not even about sustainability anymore. It's about we need to regenerate our soil, and I'm going to talk about that in 2 more slides. But first I'm going to tell you a little bit about MetaWare. So having spent the last more than 2 decades in sustainable fashion, in the trenches, trying to convince everyone that this actually was like not an if but a when, because it's an of course, and to see a room filled with people who all share this passion, I'm like pinching myself, because when I was doing public speaking 10 years ago, 15 years ago, people were like pretty much ignoring me. Someone forced them to go. And now, of course, standing room only at fashion institutes, entire tracks dedicated to sustainable fashion. And I still do live at this intersection of food and fashion, and this isn't going away anytime soon. In fact, 52% of organic shoppers are millennials. And the number one reason people start to buy organic products is when they have children. 10% of millennials have had children, which means when you start to do the math, and 80% of millennials are having kids, we're on a growth trajectory. There's no turning back. So, looking at how can MetaWare help that? So I started MetaWare 5 years ago with the mission to bring manufacturing back to America, because the only way that we can start to grow the organic cotton industry again in America is to have manufacturing infrastructure. When I started under the canopy in 1995, the United States was the #1 grower of organic cotton in the world. Today we're number 6, and it's because there's no verticality in the manufacturing system anymore. Everybody left the U.S., all the manufacturing. So the organic cotton farmers could no longer be competitive, because they're not going to turn around and be able to sell their cotton to India or China, because they're growing their own cotton, right? So when you turn around and you look at, the impacts of cotton, as I said, and the fact that we're one of the biggest cotton growing countries in the world, the United States, and we are surrounded, our clothing is not growing in the department store any more than our food is growing in the supermarket. And, our own backyards are getting ridden with all of these chemicals in agriculture, and the drift is out of control, right? So MetaWare started as kind of the intel inside to fuel this movement. So sort of like when you go to a restaurant and you get this buildable concept, we created an a la carte eco-fashion business model, where menu number 1 is, do you want made in the U.S., certified organic, or both, of course? Do you want recycled? Do you want fair trade? Do you want cradle to cradle? And we've embedded the cradle to cradle certification into MetaWare. We've also embedded the GOTS certification. I also was on the team of people that wrote the fair trade certified textile certification. So we haven't yet certified our U.S. factory, but our overseas factories are. And so the whole idea here is, tell us what stories you want to tell, right? Any of those stories. Menu 2, what kind of product do you want to make? So we make women's wear, we make t-shirts, we make men's, kids, baby, home textiles. And then menu number 3, what kind of price targets do you have? What kind of margins are you trying to reach? What's your business model? And we're going to work with you and help you figure out how to navigate the supply chain with us running that for you, and we'll try to meet your goals. So we have what we call our bronze, silver, gold, platinum manufacturing strategies. Bronze is we have turnkey production overseas. I have a team of people overseas that run our productions, do the QC. You will get the whole certification and traceability along the way. We also have made in the U.S., which is also grown and sewn in the U.S. We have a number of programs running that are Texas-grown organic cotton, married with us building the supply chain all the way, ending in our factory, our 40,000 square foot solar-powered factory in Fairfax, Virginia. We also have a proprietary seaweed-based printing process. So that's enabled us to get GOTS certification on our printing. So our silver and our gold manufacturing allow for, we might make blanks overseas and do the dyeing and the printing domestically. We might make fabric overseas. We're trying to figure out how to make the costs work. And then the 4th menu is what label do you want? And it could be co-branded, the Intel Inside concept, or your brand label, or something on our stock program. But our whole thing is we want to make sustainability easy. We want to take these challenges, these excuses out I've worked with many, many major brands and retailers through my career. I launched Target's first organic program, Macy's, Bed Bath & Beyond, so I've been at scale, wrote the business plan for Whole Foods to get into organic and sustainable textiles. So I've been in the trenches, and now I want to just see this movement proliferate and really, really grow. So, as Albert Einstein said, we can't solve today's problems with the same consciousness that created those problems. And we're here to be a solution provider and help people understand how deep those problems go, that 10% of our carbon footprint out there is from the fashion industry, and 20% of the world's freshwater pollution is from textile treatment and dyeing, and that 1 trillion kilowatt hours are being used in the fashion industry. I mean, the impacts go on, as we all know, fashion being one of the leading causes of air and water pollution. This is kind of the final piece in this MetaWare puzzle. So understanding soil, and I kind of call myself a soil junkie, being in the trenches and loving the organic movement, and really recognizing the win-win-win for the farmers and the factories and the consumer and all of us. And the average farmer, I would say, in organic is making almost 35% more money because they're not buying all the expensive inputs in this. And that's proven in this country, where there's pockets of organic agriculture. Household incomes are going up by over $2,000 a household. Poverty rates are decreasing, and communities are thriving. This is called the Hotspot Study. You could Google it. So in looking at what's happening in agriculture today, how many of you are familiar with the regenerative movement, or you've heard that term? Okay, so this whole idea of sustainability in agriculture, we're past that point. We have destroyed our soil with all the chemicals that we use, so much so that the soil is dead. Well, guess what? Just like our skin is our largest organ for absorption, the soil is the skin of the earth, and the soil was meant to sequester carbon out of our atmosphere. So we have all these issues in fashion around the chemicals that are being used, workers' rights, absolutely fair trade, front and center. But we also have to look at, the impacts that, just the starting point, what's happening at the source. And when you look at the soil being so depleted and broken, it's no longer the sponge it once was for water resilience or for carbon sequestration. So there's these two camps going on in the regenerative movement right now. There's one camp that says all hands on deck globally. And how many of you have heard of Vandana Shiva? So I'm going to be at her farm next week with a group of people in the regenerative movement, and we are, we're looking at every which way we can activate and rebuild and regenerate our soil. There's also, on the organic side, a movement with Patagonia, with Dr. Bronner's, and the Rodale Institute to drive organic a little beyond organic, and to actually look at now, how do we make sure the practices that we're using in soil are cover cropping, green manure, crop rotation, and then low to no tillage, right? Which means you're not turning the soil a lot, so that we can rebuild our system. Soil is probably one of our greatest solutions to climate change. So I've started this program called Reset, and Hannah here has been my amazing project manager on this, and we are super excited. We just finished our first year pilot. We had 88 farmers in our first year, mostly women, and it stands for Regenerate the Environment, Society, and the Economy through Textiles. And so we are teaching these farmers, we're weaning them off of the GMO seeds, we're weaning them off of the chemicals, we're teaching them how to make their own inputs. We're using practices such as zero budget farming, which says that by virtue of making their own inputs and learning how to get off of this, dependence on these chemicals, they are able to make significantly, sometimes up to 95% more money, even if they're selling their cotton at a cost-neutral place. And then on top of that, by measuring the soil and measuring how we're rebuilding the organic matter in the soil, we're actually creating those sponges again. At the end of the day, farmers out there, as much as the environmental part matters, and I love being in these farms because it's like water for chocolate for me. It gives me that kind of fuel and that juice that gets me going and brings me back here to do all the crazy work that I do. But, they want to make a living. Farmers around the world, and especially in third world countries, they can't even put food on their table. Their livelihoods have been so compromised by these broken systems. And so I think all hands on deck in terms of understanding, how do we connect source to story? How do we make the farmers cool and be able to communicate this? And then how do we, wear the change we wish to see? And, to me, there's so many spokes in the wheel of eco-fashion, which is why kind of MetaWear is this a la carte model. Looking at my book, Eco Renaissance, which the tagline is co-creating a stylish, sexy, and sustainable world. We're all in this together. We have to co-create a new reality. We have to design a new reality. And this isn't just about fashion. Fashion is one spoke in the wheel of the Eco Renaissance. The common threads across all popular culture sectors in this ecosystem rebirth, which is what Renaissance means, are creativity, connection, collaboration, community, and consciousness. And therein lies the principles that will drive us forward and hopefully, live in a better world and leave a better world for our children and our children's children. So I really appreciate all of you being here. And we have a lot of work to do in the fashion industry, but I think we're really on our way, and it gets me super excited. So.
Anything on the horizon that will replace spandex?
Right now, I think the movement, because of circularity, is going towards recycling and reconstructing a lot of the, recycled lycra. There's a recycled rubber. There's now even Lensing is doing recycled cotton blended with Textile. You've got Recover that's doing a lot of stuff. You have actually, what's it called? It's just brand new. My friend Isaac just launched. It's basically taking agriculture waste, and turning that into fabrics. So in terms of stretch fabrics, it's mostly right now the recycled versions. There's even recycled nylon now. But we're not there yet where we have found the perfect stretch that I know of. Do you know of anything? Yeah. But again, we're out there. The beauty of this movement growing where we are is there's just incredible passion and innovation that's being poured in. I mean, going to the Copenhagen Fashion Summit and seeing, 1,350 people in the room drinking the Kool-Aid, or like more and more of these kinds of events, the remote conference, and I mean, to fill the room here, I mean, haven't even scratched the surface. So, seatbelts on. Yes.
I'm curious as to your thoughts about the reshoring of all the manufacturing. What is that like? Really, for you, I love your vision. Do you really see that happening? Like the textile and manufacturing industry really picking back up and being as strong?
Yeah. So interesting question and experience that I've had, in rebuilding outerwear. So I went in, starry-eyed and hopeful and excited about what I was going to do. And it's a bear, I'm not going to lie. I mean, building manufacturing in the United States is tough. And that's because the disciplines have kind of filtered away. It's very hard to find people who want to sit there and sew. Labor force is tough. You also have limitations on the reason it works in Asia and India in terms of, manufacturing sustainability specifically. But all textiles is when I said there's so many different pieces in the puzzle, people work together. It's a complex, or it's one vertical factory that's spinning, knitting, cutting and sewing, dyeing, they're doing everything. And here it's like, I'm getting this from there, I'm getting this from there, and nobody wants to take responsibility if something goes wrong. Everybody's pointing to each other, so the level of accountability in this country can be super tough. In our factory in Virginia, it's small, right? So we can do not pure startup because there has to be some efficiency, but we can't really do a lot of scaling. It's been very hard for us to build the force here, but I am looking at building a vertically integrated factory in North Carolina, And I'm hearing more and more as I'm doing my own due diligence about other efforts that are being born. I think there's huge opportunity, and I just wrote an article for something called Sourcing Journal. I don't know how many of you know Sourcing Journal, just about this topic specifically. I think there's a huge white space, a lot of demand for quick turn, lower minimums, because of course that reduces waste, and looking at the true cost model, because if you actually look at, and one of my partners in MetaWare was out of Target. He worked there for 15 years and was very senior, and he has this model that he's used research or data from Target to determine and discover that you can actually, even your first cost is always going to be more in the US, of course, because of labor, but you can actually make more money manufacturing in the US because the mitigation of all the risks on compliance, the costs, oversee the big minimums, the liquidation, the timeline. If you really are measuring the true cost of production and looking at the profit margin, profit line versus overseas versus domestic, you'd be surprised. And I think it's getting that across to the brands and the retailers to help them look differently at first cost, so they're not like, no, I can't pay more, right? Because that's all they've been trained to think. And then I will just say, just to layer onto that, part of this process is changing some of the fundamental, like the systemic issues we have in the fashion industry around in brands and retailers, how siloed everybody is and nobody's talking. B, you actually, and I just had this conversation a couple days ago about Target, who I've worked with for over a decade, where it used to be, and someone on one of the panels was saying how I wish we would stop coming from marketing and would be more in the trenches. Well, 10 years ago, Target's sustainability efforts were driven by marketing. And today they're being driven by product design and development. They actually are holding marketing off. But even with that, the product design and development teams and the teams of people that are often doing this work in sourcing or in sustainability are passionately trying to drive change. But what's happening is the buyers and the merchants are like, we're not paying 1 cent more, because they're incentivized by virtue of not taking risk and ultimately, keeping costs down, and they're still getting pressure from the top to get costs lower at the same time that they're getting pressure from the top to be more sustainable. So there's some systems in a lot of these retailers that are very broken, and in order to really make it happen domestically, because in the same conversation they do want the quick turns and lower minimums and domestic opportunity. So it's kind of a balancing act that's happening. And do I think that we're going to get there? Yes. I think that it is the journey of 1,000 miles, right? And I've been, as you all know, I've been on this journey for a lot of years, but I'm hopeful, and I do think we're moving in the right direction. Yes. So Joelle's telling me that's it. But I'm gonna be sticking around, and also, as Rebecca mentioned, I'm going to be signing copies of my book, Eco Renaissance, after the event tonight, and I'll also answer more questions there. So, thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I have the sincere pleasure of introducing the moderator of the next panel. If you'll give me a second, I will pull up my notes. So I have known Joelle now for the last, I want to say almost a year, and had the pleasure of meeting her through Fashion Revolution USA. She was very active with us in April with the community here in DC, hosting a number of events, but I want to talk about her background. She is a Parsons graduate, researcher, journalist. She does incredible work. She recently became a TEDx speaker and did an incredible speech, which I recommend that everybody look up. Yeah, did a phenomenal job in Lebanon speaking about cherishing clothing and really the power of the cloth, which is what this panel will be speaking about. And two, she also is an entrepreneur who's putting together a great shop that I'm super excited to see. She's going to be opening it here in DC called Tribute. She's curating sustainable and ethical fashion. It's a gallery of sustainable and ethical fashion. It's unique to the DC marketplace. It's really going to be something special, just like Joelle. So Joelle, please come on.
Thank you, merci Lorraine. Thank you. So first of all, I just want to say how happy I am that we are here for that discussion. We are in the Textile Museum. This is our home. So I'm happy that we're here to talk about that and with all of you. And please, I'm going to ask you all to just introduce yourself, your name and what you do.
Good afternoon. My name is Camille Ann Brewer. I'm the curator of contemporary art here at the George Washington University in the Textile Museum. And I'd like to add one more. I'm a weaver of 32 years.
I'm not a weaver of 32 years, however. My name is Desiree Van Frederick, and I am a social entrepreneur. And I utilize the vehicle of independent retail, urban development, community development, intersecting with fashion, culture, arts, and identity to essentially shape new models for communities. And you're like, what the heck do you do? What does that mean? It means a lot of things. In short, I'm very much interested in beautifying our world, amplifying what already exists, and also facing the problems that exist. And with vigilance and passion, finding solutions, right? And evolving those solutions over time. So you still don't know what I do, but it's okay.
1 hour.
Hi, my name is Karin from B4, and I am a retail journalist. I work for a publication called Retail Dive, where I'm an editor. I also co-host a podcast called Pop Fashion, where we talk about exactly what we're talking about in this room.
Excellent.
And you guys should totally subscribe.
Wow. Hey guys, my name is Amanda Vega, and I'm the owner and curator of an online boutique called Kaleidos. It's based out of Falls Church, Virginia, and I ultimately purvey a collection of a mix of vintage and independent designers who are mindful about ethical production.
Hi, my name is Nicole Alfieri. I have a knitwear line. It's women's knitwear. Everything is made in the U.S. and we use all natural fibers and organic cotton, all of that.
Alright, so we're going to start with a question on fashion and identity. They say fashion speaks louder than words. So fashion is not only about what you wear, it's about why you wear it. So I'm just going to ask you that question, what fashion really means to you.
Last I checked, it was unlawful to leave your house nude. And as a result of that, this is something we engage with every day, right? To wear, how to present oneself to the world. And growing up, I was raised by my maternal grandparents, Matilda and Emmerich, in Freetown, Sierra Leone. And my maternal grandmother was an extremely fashionable woman. I mean, words don't even, suffice to describe how intentional she was in the way that she presented herself to the world every single day. And whether it was, she was an entrepreneur, a serial entrepreneur, perhaps that's where I get those, that I got that bug. But she was someone who just, no matter what she was doing and where she was going, she put dedicated effort into her dress. And I took note of that, from young. And so at this point, fashion is something that is so many words. The one space in which I have full and complete agency. It's the one area in this world, and I view it as very much a political expression that I get to set the terms, right? Whether it's how I wear my hair, whether it's, if I choose and opt into cosmetics or not, what garments I utilize and incorporate into my own personal wardrobe, and how I interchange those things day to day. And it isn't just based on how I feel, it's very much based on how I want you to perceive me, because that's the power that I have. And so fashion is something that is a tool in my arsenal.
Yeah, I mean, fashion for me is just, it is how I feel on any given day. but also how sometimes how I want to feel if I'm not feeling that certain thing. So for me, I see it as a way. Fashion is obviously clothing, but it's how I create myself. It's kind of like an artist that uses their paint to create their piece of work. I see fashion in that same way, to express creatively how I want to be seen, how I want to feel. So yeah, that's what fashion is to me.
For me personally, I think I have a lot of the same feelings, when I dress in the morning. Sort of, that's how I'm feeling or how I want to feel. But what I see in my work with my customers, fashion can be sort of transformative in a way. I see people who come in and, they're sort of dressed and they're walking a certain way, they're dressed a certain way, and then they put on a garment that's, that I made or a friend of mine or someone, who I know is made. And they sort of stand up a little bit straighter and they feel better. It has sort of, I don't want to say power, but there's just something about fashion that sort of affects us, that changes how we feel and feel about ourselves, I think.
Camille, as a curator of contemporary art, you deal with textile. Every day you touch textile. And textile tells the story of our culture, of our society. So can you tell us a little bit how you engage with textile? How relevant is it? And talk about
That's a heavy question. We can go, you could talk about the fibers, but the fiber in the hand of a skilled artisan, they're dictating culture directly to it. Do I spin it to the right? Do I spin it to the left? That's culturally dictated. The colors that you may use represent different facets of your belief system, your culture. So you've got color, then you've got to add pattern in it. And is it tapestry weave, or is it twill, or is it satin? That's all dictated by, informed by culture. And so that's what I'm thinking about. We have an artist here visiting from Azerbaijan, and he and I went to textile storage to look at Shipibo textiles from Peru. And we were looking at the drawn patterns on the cotton. And at a quick glance, it looks symmetrical, like, oh, it's just a symmetrical pattern. But when you really sit with it, you realize, no, there's a lot more going on here. And what's this person trying to communicate with me in the pattern on the surface of the cloth? So that's what we're investigating here at the Textile Museum. The show upstairs, there's women who produce those cloths. They're the bank of those patterns. And their daughters sit next to them at the loom, and they teach those patterns to their daughters. But these are nomadic people, so they don't have paper with patterns written out on draft paper. It's all housed here. And what's the voice of those patterns? Why use that pattern versus this one? Why use this color versus this one? So you see that in culture all around the world. So that's what I'm looking at. That's what I'm thinking about. As a weaver, I'm real big on structure. There's some artists that come and say, well, I take whole cloth and I assemble it this way, but do you know how to make lace? Do you know how to weave? Do you know how to knit? Do you know how to build cloth? And so that's my focus as a curator, and I feel real strongly about that.
You want to talk about how relevant is it in your daily life?
I mean, in short, I view fashion in my own personal aesthetic as, performance art. I have, and I'm a performer. Hi, welcome. Nice to meet you all. In so many words, it really allows me to kind of shape an identity. I'm kind of echoing my remarks earlier. It's that one space in which you are able to create self, fully and wholly, and own yourself. I'll give you a very quick story. In 2004, I became undocumented in the United States, which meant I had no legal right to do anything. Breathing was actually problematic. I couldn't travel, couldn't work, could not drive, couldn't do anything. I endured that condition for a period of almost 13 years. And I fought the case, of course, which is why I'm still here. Don't worry, they know I'm here. And during that period, I had frequent court hearings in federal immigration court. Several times a month sometimes, and many times throughout a year. And in a space where I had no power and to dictate what my life would become, right? What I could do, where I could go, who I could be. I had the power to shape myself and to dress myself, and I walked into that courtroom and any other space that I was required in a way that, again, that declared my own agency. As I sat in front of a federal judge who would then decide what would become of my life, I presented myself in the way that I wanted to. So it became so significant to me in the way that I prepared and dressed myself every single day, because again, it was that one space that I could actually relish in, like my own imaginative capacity, right, of who I could be in this world, what I could contribute to this world, and not allowing the circumstance and the condition to define me. So there was that. It was a tool once again, and a weapon. And so fashion is something that is so incredibly powerful because we all have that ability and that capacity to shape it, right? And then it dictates how everyone else responds to you, you know? So it's a powerful thing. No?
Nicole, you mentioned that clothes can transform the wearers. So I know that within your work also and your clients and your customers, you had this experience. So can you elaborate a little bit on that?
With my own company, I've seen that a little bit, but there was a woman who I used to work for where I really saw that quite a bit. I designed for her, sorry. She makes these beautiful, pieces that should be in this museum. She does her production out of Nepal and India, and there's a lot of hand stitching, hand dyeing, hand block printing. It's just insane. These fabrics are absolutely gorgeous. But they're very, different from a typical DC wardrobe. I'd see these women come in, and they were very, they had their suits on, they would come in, and, they were fascinated by everything, but they seemed a little uncomfortable. And then, she's a very, expressive and warm and a nice person, and she'd sort of convince them, we'll just try this one piece, and we'll just play. And she would just start, we'll start with one piece, and then, she'd sort of tie it over here and do a little bit, differently over here, and then try something else on. And, the person the first time would probably leave with maybe one piece, maybe not, but they'd come back because it was such an amazing experience being around all these beautiful clothes. And you could tell there was love made in, everything was made with love, and there was this energy. And then I saw these women slowly over time transforming from, being very conservative, decent, government workers or whatever they were, lawyers, lobbyists. And then they would slowly come and they'd get a little bit more relaxed, and sort of their personality would shine through. And they really started to reflect who they were, and what they wore. It was really interesting to see. They sort of started out being the cookie cutter image of what you would expect a businesswoman or government worker to be, and then they would develop and really start wearing things that reflected their own personality, and it was just really beautiful to watch. And I felt more confident, and it was just really neat.
So let's discuss clothing as memory keepers. Can you please, whoever want to discuss that, talk about a specific piece of clothing, maybe your favorite, and why is it important to you?
Yeah, this is something I have that I don't wear, but it's just the sweetest thing. When I first learned how to knit on the knitting machine, I made a sweater, and it was for my son, who was very little at the time. He was probably 8 years old. And it's this tiny little orange sweater, and it has all sorts of mistakes on it, but it's just the cutest thing, and that's the one thing, the one article of clothing that I could never get rid of. It's just so beautiful.
I was thinking about this, and I feel like I don't have a piece of item that I frequent, that I love so much and cherish, but there are a couple of handful of pieces that I've stolen from my grandmother's closet. And I don't frequent them often, but I keep them in my closet and I cherish them. And sometimes I wear them, which is fun, but sometimes it's not my aesthetic, so I don't, but I hold on to it, and I feel like I'm going to hold on to it for a really long time because it reminds me of my grandmother, and it smells like smoke because she frequents, she's a lifetime smoker, unfortunately. But again, there's something special about that, the smell, the memory.
So talking about the subject of how clothing is tied to memory, there's a reason why when someone passes away, what to do with their clothes?
Yes.
What do you do with their clothes?
Give them to me.
Yeah, kind of. But there's something about clothing standing witness to a life, and how you can't kind of wash a person out of it, because like you can still smell them, like you said, you can still smell them, and clothing isn't just clothes, and there's a history there that can continue if it's great clothing that lasts. So one of my favorite pieces, it sounds like a cop-out answer, but it's my wedding dress. And my wedding dress, I went to Polly Sue's in Silver Spring, and it's a wedding dress that I got off the rack. It cost me $80, and it was from the 1950s, and it was somebody's Sweet 16 dress. And I mean, it made me so happy to be able to, this dress was a celebration that gets to be a celebration again, and I don't know the woman who had it before me, but there is something that rubs off. There's something that it continues to have a life. That's exciting. And I also got married on DC Metro, which is a totally different story, which I'm happy to tell you after this if you want to hear about it. On the Metro. Yeah, I know. On the train. Yeah, I'll tell you afterwards so we don't get distracted. I'll tell you about it. But anyway, it smells like Metro. No. But it's a continuation of the documentation of the story that it continues to have a life beyond me. And that brings me a lot of joy. It really does.
So about 90% of my wardrobe is vintage. I've been collecting since I was about 8 years old or so. At 8 years old, I would find gowns and buy them and keep them, and now I can wear them. I'm an adult, and I have to go to fancy places and fancy gowns. So I spent a lot of my time in undergrad and in graduate school. Granted, I completed my undergrad in fashion merchandising and then went on to complete an MBA. While at Kellogg in Chicago, I knew that was not the place for me necessarily. It didn't fulfill kind of, again, that imaginative capacity that was within me, that artist brain that I have. And so I spent every single possible minute I had scouring estate sales throughout Chicago. And I amassed a lot of treasures. And and I still do this. This is like what I do on the weekends. I go and I source, and I research these goods extensively, and I've developed an archive. And my interest in these goods, in the same way an art historian's kind of role and responsibility, is to examine, right? To examine art and to define and perhaps present an interpretation beyond what is and what may be explicit. I view and do the same with vintage. And what that allows, in the sense of, to your point, Jane, the power of memory, right, and carrying forth something that was a part of someone else's existence and a part of their own life narrative, right, and the continuation of the many lives that garment and that fabric, has contributed to. And I quite often kind of remember, who would have worn this, or try to imagine, rather, who would have worn this, where what do they do? Where do they go? Sometimes I actually get to answer those questions, right? Because I'm nosy. So sometimes I actually get to fulfill those questions. In other times, I just allow my own mind and my own brain to kind of shape and determine the possibilities of that. And so we are custodians, right, of goods, obviously. But more so, we're custodians of life experiences. We have this incredible opportunity to carry them forward. So I encourage all of you to shop vintage. There are a few amazing vintage stores here in DC. We'll share some recommendations.
My name's Brewer, and the Brewers were tailors. I can trace the Brewers back to 1810 as tailors and producers of cloth. And as a little girl, I grew up with a cousin who was a master tailor. And Camille would draw pictures of the dresses she wanted, and Jewel would just produce them. So I do have one of those dresses because it's my idea onto paper, and then Jewel taking the paper and interpreting it in cloth. I just made a piece recently in the last year. We had a wonderful exhibition here last fall called Scraps, creative reuse and textile fashion. And we invited Howard University's Fashion Design Department to have a fashion show here. And so I had a box of junk yarn I got from my yarn guy, Charles. I've been buying yarn from him for 30 years. $2 a cone, so I reach, and can't pass up $2 a cone. So I'm sitting on this yarn, and the fashion faculty at Howard suggested, won't you make something? So I wove 7 yards of a plaited twill with the fabric, and I had an old remnant from Chicago, from Fishman's, Fishman's. And I built this coat, and it was the first time I built a garment with my own weaving. I was trained as a fine artist to produce pieces for the wall. I had never built a garment with my own fabric. So it was nice to bring it and show it off. And it was nice to see someone else in it, believe it or not, because I don't get an opportunity to see the back or, see it on. And I don't have it here. I would have worn it today, but it's in Detroit right now. But I'm sure my daughter will hang on to that after I'm gone and share with her daughters that your grandmother wove this textile, and they'll probably throw it on their backs in high school or something like that.
But I also know that the dress that you're wearing has an interesting story, this psychedelic dress that you're wearing. So do you want to share that story?
A couple people have come up to me and recognized the manufacturer of this dress. It's a company called Zuri, Z-U-R-I, and the dress is manufactured in Kenya. The owners of the company source remnants of Dutch wax across the entire continent. So once you see the dress, you see this dress, the fabric's gone. They produce so many dresses and it's over with because it's the mill end. And they work with a manufacturer in Kenya that provides daycare services for the workers, a living wage, education, et cetera, et cetera. And this factory, I think, works with 4 fashion designers and produces their line. I wear it all over the world. I just was in Japan and I was a keynote speaker at a natural dye conference in northern Japan. And people come up and say, oh, that's a wonderful dress. And it gives me an opportunity to share the story about what's going on in Kenya. The Kenyan government has banned dumping, no more dumping of Western clothes into the secondary market. We're building our own garment industry, so I can share that with people. So it's a way, like a billboard. Come talk to me about this, and I can tell you about what's happening in East Africa around the garment industry.
I think they still can, though. I think they can still send clothing over to Kenya.
They
tried to ban it, but
did the United States say we're not going to play with you if you do it? Yeah.
Can Amanda, I wanted to ask about how important is vintage in your business, and what is how are people, because I know that you have this online. So how do you sell online vintage, and do you get? What kind of questions do you get about the garment? And if you want also to talk a little bit about sourcing, that would be interesting, and care. You can move on to care after that.
So I am an online retailer, so when I bring a vintage garment, there's some sort of education that I need to teach my customer because not everyone understands vintage. Vintage sizing has changed, fabrics, the way it's been made has changed. So as an online retailer to sell it, there's a lot of measurements, a lot of explanation, a lot of photos help. And the fun part for me is bringing that piece of garment back to life. So the styling aspect is really fun. So I get to style it and show different ways and teach my customer on how you can wear and bring a vintage piece to life. What was the other question? Sourcing. First of all, Desiree, can you take me on your weekend trips?
Everyone will come. I think this is part of the
Yeah. I love sourcing. Anywhere I can find vintage pieces, I will go to. For me, the sourcing experience is exhilarating. It's my happy place. I can be there for hours and hours and hours just going through. I'll try to bring my sisters or friends, and they're like, that's why there's me and there's a market. I will purge those things for you, dry clean it, and then style it, and then show it to you. For me, it's my happy place. Sourcing, I go through piece by piece by piece. Sometimes when I go, I have maybe a certain color or texture in mind that I'm looking for, so that way I don't have to go through the whole entire store or place. And the fun part for me in sourcing is I'm the one that is seeing a potential in this piece. There is that mystery, there is that, and I want to bring that to life, and those are the pieces that I pick and pull and bring into my shop. There is also a lot of sniff testing and thorough examination of holes and stains. There's that aspect as well. But I love it, so that's my sourcing process. No, what's inside? You gotta take me, girl. We're gonna go. Yeah.
Let's do a field trip.
Yeah, Unveiling Fashion. Go for it.
Do you want to add something?
Yes, no, I'm talking so much. Where are you giving me the microphone? We get it, right? I operated a vintage store several years back called Nomad Yard, and I considered it a wonderland. Was that applause?
Yeah.
For what? Stop it. No, it was a wonderland. It was my happy place because it's my happy place beyond the find, right? It was then the element of sharing these finds with other people and not allowing them to add layers to my finds, right? To add context and nuance to these things that I found interesting. Not always beautiful. Not everything was beautiful. Some things were just surely interested, right? And they were then permitted perhaps the opportunity to add, that layer of beauty to it. My grandmother used to say something to me, and it read, and all alike had this opportunity to contribute their own narrative to this thing. And that's where, for me, magic happens. It's when you're able to bring something into your life, understand that you are a custodian of time, right? And then present it and interpret it in a way that makes sense for you and the world, the life that you live.
Talking about, let's go back to the clothes that we wear today and talk a bit more about longevity of clothes and the clothing life cycle. Better quality and longer lasting clothes. But we know also that when we care, our clothes will last longer. So why is it important to care, and what are the tips that you could give us to keep that garment for longer?
Actually just going to say something about that, because I think we're talking about vintage clothes and how wonderful they are, and the stories and the life of the clothes and all that. I think that's why it's important to make good clothing now, because all of this fashion stuff, it doesn't last more than a year or good quality, made to last. It'll fit better and it'll last better. And you take, the consumer has to take care of it. You don't put anything in the dryer. Hang everything, wash it, by hand, cold water. Just take care of your clothes. They'll last forever. I mean, for a very long time, especially if they're made very well. I think that's very important.
I think when we take better care of our clothes, it obviously lasts longer, but I also think what happens is when you take care of something with care, it sort of produces a habit of, what am I trying to say? I feel like when you take care of something, then you love it more, you want it to last longer. It's sort of an investment, and you're breaking the habit of sort of this fickleness of like, I can just dispose of this quickly. So when we sort of nurture that practice of taking care of the things that we have so that they are longer, so that we love them better, I think we're sort of, I like to believe that we're breaking that habit of sort of that fickle-mindedness as consumers, that we need more when we can just take care of things and make things last longer. That makes sense. Does that make sense?
One thing I want to address about the subject is I think there used to be an equation where if you spent money on a garment, it would last. And I don't know if that's true anymore. I think people equated designer with high end and with longevity. I think it happens, but I also think that I've seen some work that's come out in the past 5 years, and I've been like, how much are you charging for this thing?
Yeah.
So one thing that, I used to be a fashion consultant. I had a fashion consultant business here in DC for almost a decade. And one thing that I tell my clients is before you buy, no matter where you buy it from, turn your garment inside out and look at the stitching.
Yes.
And if the stitches, you don't have to really know anything about sewing, but if you see that the stitches are even and small and look consistent throughout the garment, that'll tell you something about quality, because there's a lot of things where you don't have to have a trained eye. You turn it inside out and it is falling apart while it's on the rack. Like, there are strings, the stitching is just uneven, and I think that there still is a correlation between like investment clothes and picking out pieces that are smart, but I think we have to look beyond labels and saying this thing is not going to work, this thing will, because of whose name is attached to it, and like just start turning your garments inside out and see what's happening on the inside.
I grew up in Los Angeles, and I had 2 relatives that worked in the sweat shops. And I remember Shirley saying, I'm sewing the same dress, but if you put a funky label in it, it's one price. And I take the same garment, I put another label in it, it's another price. It's the same garment. I made both garments. So that is very true. Just looking at the seams, I taught weaving off and on for many years, and I tell my students, you'll never look at a garment the same way after you construct fabric. You'll take out the poor stuff right away. You can feel it. You don't even need to look at it. You can feel it with your hands, and the high quality stuff you hold on. But Janice said something last year that stuck with me about caring for clothes. Read the label, the care label, and follow the instructions, and that helps too with the longevity of the garment and the fabric.
So I'm a Fashion Nova brand ambassador. I feel really bad being here. It's a joke. I'm not a Fashion Nova ambassador. It's a joke, people. Digital age influencers. Anyway, so there's this. I think a lot about all the points that have been made, right? The accessibility, what denotes quality of a garment, who has access to the garment. And, my question then comes in, who has access to quality made goods, right? We understand, the relationship between natural fabrics and your own health, right? The ability for your skin to breathe, right? Your pores to remain open because, again, your body needs to detox constantly so that you maintain optimal health. And fabrics and the textiles that we wear play a very, really critical part of that. Because consider this, we're in clothes or clothed the majority of our lives. For some of you live much more exciting lives than I do, but I am for sure. And so the idea that we need to be more conscious of acquiring and gaining access to more natural fabrics that allow our bodies to function the way they were designed to is one thing. The other element of that that comes to mind is because in my work, literally, which is again, this intersection of like social awareness, ensuring that there is a mindfulness that goes into equity, social economic equity, right? So who has the money and can afford to purchase something that is of high quality, that will sustain and last longer, that will be better for them aesthetically, but also, you know, as relates to health. And quite often, these things are not taken into consideration because everyone in this room, myself included, has a certain level of privilege, right? So even have and engage in this discourse. But the majority of people who are accessing the Forever 21s, the Fashion Novas, and brands of that sort, I mean, did you all read the Fashion Nova article that was in BOF in back? We've discussed this at length. We've poured our hearts over this. But these brands are growing and growing and growing and growing and growing and growing because people want either, because I don't necessarily believe it's lack of education. The information is out there. But the education is only accessing, it's only accessing a certain demographic. People like us in this room who have the interest to even attend a conference of this nature. And so I'm constantly trying to figure out what does it look like to ensure that the information and the awareness that we possess reaches beyond us, right? And meets the majority of the world who are consuming because this is what they can afford, this is what they can access, and this is, again, what is presented to them, right? So there are lots of questions within that. Keeping in mind equity, very important, particularly in fashion.
But I would also say that it's also, I mean, I've been in DC for a year, and the interest, people are not really interested in fashion. The first thing that they tell you when you say, oh, you work in fashion, oh, okay. And I don't really care, and I'm just like, well, you get up every morning and you put on something, so you must care, you know, somehow. So I think also, and that's why, I mean, this discussion around the value of a garment, to elevate a garment to not only, you know, a piece of cloth that you wear around and you just throw away because you just don't like it, or because fashion tells you, a fashion magazine tells you that this is not on trend this season. So yeah, I think it's education. It's also, you know, elevating.
But I think a change happened though, and I keep saying this. Maybe it's my generation. What was it? I guess in the Reagan years, they started eliminating the arts in K through 12. They eliminated sewing. They eliminated cooking. They eliminated painting and pottery. And so we've got a couple generations of folks who don't know how to patch a seam or mend a hole or put a button on. And so this fast fashion, this junk food clothing is marketed to these folks. And so they don't know any different unless, we have this type of conference and educate people. But there has been a major paradigm shift in what making is. If it's a preparation of food, preparation of clothing. I took electric shop in middle school. Learned how to wire a lamp. You know, again, I don't go out and buy a new lamp. I can get one at the thrift store and rewire it and get a nice vintage lamp. So those type of skills are, you have to seek them out. Is there a tailor in town teaching tailoring?
I'm going to contribute to your point, Joelle, because I think anyone who's lived in DC for any considered amount of time, perhaps has made that very statement that people in DC do not care about fashion. And I argue that, I challenge that, and I have challenged that idea for many, many years. It's probably why so I'll say I'll say this. I understand Washington, D.C. to be a very unique city, first of all, right? This city attracts the best of the best, and yourselves included, right? We're the people who come here from all over the globe and from all parts of the domestic United States are those who have an interest in one way or another, whether it's through politics, through medicine, through research, through academia, in one way or another solving problems, right? Quite intellectual people. Intellectual people don't necessarily spend their time trying to color match and color coordinate and trying to identify, well, what's on trend and how do I incorporate that, because they're too busy trying to solve some of the world's greatest challenges. And in fact, I want them to do that, right? Please do solve something, or anything. I don't have an expectation of them to be among the most fashionable people. I do have an expectation, however, and I do actually, and I've engaged this, that these are among the world's most curious people. So given the opportunity to access fashion in ways that perhaps was outside of their language, right? Because we speak a certain language, and we expect them to understand it, but then when they explain what they do, we're like, oh, okay, whatever, So we have to essentially find ways to translate, right, why fashion is important and how they can incorporate that into their day-to-day and essentially create a value proposition for them. Because they understand the necessity of fashion, they get dressed every single day, to your point. However, if they understood the power of their own dress, right, what they engage, these are people who will easily understand, most of them, the global crisis that we're experiencing, the environmental challenges, et cetera, if we're able to make that connection with the fashion industry instead of existing in our own silo and judging everyone else, I think it gives us a really grand opportunity to bring the rest of them along with us and to also then engage in the work that they do. Fashion is something that transcends all industries. It truly does, because again, we all have to engage with it every single day. And when Nomad Yard opened, I had things that I was told no one's going to buy because you have gowns and vintage kimonos and Japanese farmers jackets and all types of indigenous textiles. Also has the vintage Levi's and all those things as well, the leather jackets, etc. And I was told that it was too fashionable. I was told you need to move to New York and open this store there. But I was like, have you seen in New York commercial real estate prices? No. We're on part now, but that was 4 or 5 years ago. And I found that people right here in D.C., those who worked on the Hill, those who worked in law firms on K Street, one of the world's most powerful streets, came into Nomad Yard, and when given the opportunity to engage these items, to touch them, to ask questions, also made the purchase and walked away with it, and would perhaps post something or come back in the store, oh, I wore that jacket, to dinner. It may not have been to my, my professional life, but I wore it out with friends or to that family event, whatever it may be. And I like it. I love it. I want more. It's like a drug. I was a drug dealer. I'll stop there.
Yes, of course.
So I want to tell a quick story that's based on that about DC not caring about fashion, but there is kind of this intellectual curiosity that is here. I wore an outfit to work yesterday, and I work in the newsroom. To anybody here, it would seem pretty okay, whatever. But to an office place, it was a little confusing to people. So it was black pants, black long sleeve shirt, and then it was a belt that had 2 clasps and fringe, pink fringe all the way down. So I had a number of people come up to me and be like, what are you wearing? Is it a skirt? And they couldn't figure out if I was wearing a skirt or a belt. And it caused, people were like, what is going on? And the funny thing that I really appreciated about what you said was because they're all journalists, they wanted to ask me a bunch of questions. And I was getting stopped constantly about it. And I didn't understand why a belt was confusing to people, but it's DC, and I do appreciate that, maybe they won't dress it themselves, but there is kind of this curiosity that they can't help themselves. They're so type A, we all are, and maybe there's a way to kind of tap into that to do some really fun education. And I was able to tell people that a belt can look like different things.
Yeah, I totally agree. And even during my conversation, when they ask me where do you think we can shop, independent local retailers, they're like, where? I'm like, just they are, there is a bunch that are here, and just like and so I'm willing always to just give them, okay, just I'll send you an email with a list. There are local retailers. Their prices are affordable. They're, it's a beautiful product, quality, and everything. So yeah, I'm hopeful, and I'm still here, so I'm very hopeful. No, I'm here. The collective is here. All right, I have one more question to you all, and then if you guys have a question, we can take one or two. So it's a big question. I mean, is or can fashion be a catalyst for social change? Desiree?
You'll never invite me on another panel. Absolutely, the answer is yes. And I say this, and in studying history, and my interest with vintage specifically was always to identify global and world people in times past, right? There was a time when I Googled vintage, and all I saw were Europeans, and I was confused, because I wondered where all the colored people were at that time. Why aren't they online? And I really wanted to understand what that really meant, understanding that although we consider this to be a global, perhaps the world is at its most globalized at this stage, we've always been migrating people, right? So we've always exchanged and shared, and a lot of my interest in fashion, particularly as a political tool, has been to examine the groups that have created very specific and unique identities for their movements. Can anyone name one that may come to mind? A group of people who have utilized
Black Panther.
boom, right? That comes to all of our, that's probably singed in all of our collective memory. The Black Panthers, the Brown Berets, right? Solidaras of Mexico, we familiar the women freedom fighters who were impeccably dressed. Oh my gosh, if you Google them. I try to emulate their aesthetic as often as possible. I'm not as badass as they are, but I really try. And it's very, 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 very possible to understand the correlation and the relationship with dress and one's political position, right? And you can see a Black Panther, and they still exist, by the way, they're still around. You can see a Black Panther, and just based on their garb, that beret, that monochromatic black, they made it so cool. You're like, I would have probably joined had I been alive at the time, just because I wanted to wear the clothes. I just want to be cool with you guys. I don't want to work, though. I don't want to protest. I just want to be cool. And so absolutely fashion is something that groups can use, and believe it or not, we all form our own groups, and our own groups and our own friend circles tend to emulate dress. You kind of gravitate to people who either have a similar inclination, a similar aesthetic, or at least an interest. And if you've been friends long enough, you show up at brunch and you're all dressed alike. It happens.
Trying to think about it.
I feel like I have something percolating, but maybe not. Yes, I do believe that fashion can be a catalyst for change. I think in many ways, and I think my brain just kind of like mulling and stirring over right now, but I think the thing that comes to the forefront is kind of what you said about what you're wearing and someone coming up and asking you, oh, where's that from? I think what we wear, our fashion, when we have those conversations, whether it's, oh my God, that's so cute, where did you get it? There's a conversation right there that can start a social change, and each one of us as individuals we can do that. Sometimes, everything that we're talking about here can be really, really overwhelming, but that can be a really just tangible way of creating social change individually without feeling overwhelming.
I mean, fashion is tied to politics. That's all there's to it. If you don't believe me, go out and wear a red hat right now and see what happens, because you are identified with the group. And women's bodies are political. I mean, it's all tied together. So I think like the idea of harnessing power through clothing is absolutely possible. I think we saw part of it within the last political cycle, and it was really exciting. It was really exciting. So.
And this one too, with so many women running. I'm going to see more variety.
So I have one comment. One of the biggest imports from clothing, impacts. One of the biggest impacts, I'm joking, from clothing is the care after purchase. So people here may want to think about also using eco-detergents and green dry cleaners, yes, such as wet cleaning instead of perk, which is a carcinogen. Thank you. Yes, you're totally right. Thanks for mentioning that. And one question, the last one.
Also, Cora bags and Guppy Friend.
Yes.
Maybe she can.
Yeah, but you have to buy it online, right?
Yes, Cora.
I think it's from Holland. No.
Cora Ball, I think, is US. Guppy bag came out of Germany.
Germany.
And no, it's now sold online.
Exactly. It's a bag that captures the micro one question quickly. So how do we educate our peers or the general collective and get them to care? Word of mouth, traditional media. What is going to succeed? Everything.
With the state of traditional media, mainstream media, we should all be very concerned. The only thing people would watch in YouTube, get on YouTube and talk. Everyone's going on.
Fashion Revolution website educates people quite well. The DC Collective also is going to put some stuff online. I think that the Textile Museum also has some stuff. It's there. It's just you have to go and look for it, unfortunately.
I agree to make our own content though too. Everybody in this, talk about empowerment. Like everybody has that voice to.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we have to wrap up. So thank you to our speakers here. And I invite the DC Sustainable Collective to come here, Cabaret. So we're gonna just wrap up. I think take your notes and then we start reading. Thank you.
I'm getting ready to get a little emotional because I care about these two women and Gabrielle very, 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 very much. We have a major love affair with the Textile Museum because it's the way we met. People gonna show up, and so we are so thankful to you guys for showing up and giving up this Saturday. And we hope that we imparted some wisdom to you guys, and we plan to do so many more things. So we hope that you guys will hang in there with us. I just want to run through a quick list of all the thank yous. We want to thank the museum, obviously, for hosting us. Museum Director John Whitnall, Lori Crutchler, you are my angel. I absolutely adore you. Camille and Brewer, same thing. I love you so much. Martin Cret, who put up with us and put all this stuff up and put out all the chairs. Love you. All the staff and volunteers at the museum. Thank you to Lauren Fay. Love you. So helpful. Thank you to Shannon Welch. Love you. So helpful. To all of our volunteers, all the people who came in and helped us out and helped keep everything organized. To our sponsors, Sweet Green, Bethesda Bagels, Munchies, Shopkeepers, Wine Key Experience, Indie Fashion Week, Digital Rebel, Fierce Fabulous Finds, Bruna. We also, for those of you that are going over to the party, we have more things to give out, so we'll give out some stuff over there. Bruna, Sue McCarthy, Q Bottle, Cut from the Cloth, Marcy Zaroff, Metalwear Organic, Saks Underwear, Fashion Revolution USA, Pico Vella, Artesian Artifacts, Power Jewelry, Textiles, Fashion Magazine, Divine Chocolate. Did y'all eat y'all's chocolates? That should be against the law. Rethread DC, DOEE, Sustainable DC, Zero Waste DC, So Creative Lounge, Arturo for all the bags, Beth Fatini, Pozu, and Rent the Runway.
So one last thing before we all go. Camille is leaving us to go to Detroit for a new adventure. So we just want to thank, because it started with Camille basically being here and I was her intern. And so thank you for your service. Thank you for bringing us
Today's
together.
an historic day. I keep saying that to people. 10 years from now, we'll be talking about this day. This is an important day. And you don't realize you're in a magical moment until it starts to wind down and it,
Well, you were here, and you'll always be here. So we have a gift for you, but it was illegal to bring that gift into that museum.
Not for what y'all think, okay?
For bacteria reasons. So it's outside with Danielle, and thank you. And thank you to all of you.